Round 5 of Utah Sport Bike Association racing and the whole season are now done. This video is going to cover my weekend and overall season performance. I will have a video detailing my costs, both monetary and otherwise, in the coming weeks or months to help those who hope to get into racing. I think people missed the mark for what a budget season can look like for both high and low estimates, and I want to add my own data point to the public pool of knowledge. My goals for this weekend were to finish P not last and have a PB of sub 2 minutes. Between rounds 3 and 5, I had 2 critical events occur, the first of which was skipping round 4 to go to Sturgis with my family. The second of these was requiring an engine rebuild after spinning a crank bearing. Both of these went fairly well, but had a few speed bumps. Unfortunately, I started to feel sick the first day coming back home from Sturgis, and then it rained and thundered through Yellowstone, which, while very cool to see, was not ideal when I already felt like garbage. The engine was much more of an adventure in the misadventure sense. I ordered an allegedly 12,000 mile Gen 1 SV650 motor with, quote, 170 plus PSI of compression, and, quote, no significant leaks, as well as a better condition gas tank from eBay, both from one seller. This totaled $750 to my door. The motor actually had 20% leakage on both cylinders and enough rust in both jugs to be unhonable without overboring, 0 usable valves, and an exhaust camshaft with pitting on one of the lobes. It was also a California model engine, which just means that it has pair valves, something that's completely fixable and I should have seen from the photos. The motor will now be classified as the California motor, and the original motor that I got with the bike will be called the old motor. When I discovered the California motor had some problems, it was time to Frankenstein things. I combined the California bottom end, pistons, and fresh rings with fresh head gaskets, and put the old cylinders, which were measured perfectly to spec according to the Haynes manual, and the old heads. I also swapped the California intake cams for the old exhaust cams. While I was in there, I also added completely new exhaust valves on both cylinders and reused the original intake valves. These were the only usable valves in any of the motors, and I hope they are a little bit nicer. I seated all of them and everything is good there. Using the intake cams on the exhaust give marginally more lift and allegedly a little more power. This is the only power performance upgrade on the bike. My suspension disqualifies me from any classes that care about engine modification anyway, so I figured I've got the parts, why not use them? It doesn't cost me anything extra to put in these parts that I already have. I also used thinner Spears Racing head gaskets because they cost maybe 15 cents more than a set of OEM gaskets, and I may as well do it for the free higher compression. In order to break in the motor, I took it around the local nature trail track. This was a very nice process. I focused less on running things out and going 100%, focusing more on other parts of riding. After 100 miles of track and a little bit of street riding, when I put it back in street configuration, it was time for an oil change after the 100 miles. Then I ramped it up to 100% performance again on the track. 3 weeks before round 5, unfortunately, while I was getting around the track very nicely, I low-sided, going too fast, trying to follow a better rider. I made the mistake of following this rider's line with my typical line throttle application, and timing, and delivery. This meant that with the level of lean following his line, the steering input, throttle application, cooling temperatures, and the tire profile I have, as well as the tiniest of bumps, I low-sided. I was perfectly fine. My suit has a couple new scuffs, and no other damage to me. This cost about $100 in parts, a fresh clip-on, and a rear set bracket just needed replaced. Everything else was perfectly fine. Unfortunately, this was more of a mentally damaging mistake than physically. It completely killed my confidence. Throughout the day, while I was going clockwise around the track, I had been tapping knee through the carousel and riding confidently. While going counterclockwise, I had tapped knee twice going around the carousel, but both felt somewhat sketchy. After a week off and getting the new parts in, as well as helping to run Gunfighter Gauntlet, I returned to the track and never touched knee in the carousel going clockwise nor counterclockwise, even with double thick knee pucks. Interestingly, I tapped knee confidently coming through the hole going counterclockwise, something I have never done before. This is the first bike that I've ridden that doesn't scrape hard parts before getting to a dangerous level of lean. I have ground the pegs on my Bolt into dust, and the same is true on my GPZ 550. Both of these bikes, while riding them, teach me, hey, here is a super obvious sign you're approaching a sketchy amount of traction. You should be careful. The SV has no such obvious warnings. There is no way that the pegs could touch or any other hard parts could touch while the bike is still on the tires. If I want anything to touch down and give me concrete and consistent feel of how close I am to running out of grip, the SV is not the situation for me with my body position. Something needs to change there. This lack of feeling, I believe, is what helped to give me to create the Lowside, and it has also crushed my confidence. After this confidence killer, it was time to head down to the Utah Motorsports campus. There, I was told that I couldn't camp where I had reserved because there was a vent on the dirt course, so I got put in the RV lot in my tent. This meant that I was surrounded by RVs with generators that were running, and there were bright lights all over, so I couldn't sleep. I put my sleeping bag in the passenger seat of my truck, drove to a quiet and less well-lit area, and slept in my truck. The morning then began with the riders meeting, typical riders meeting things, but this time I got lucky. I won a buy one get one free tire set from Toxic Moto. I later used this during the weekend, I'll talk about it later. Practice 1, the track was fairly cold, and someone binned it in turn 6 on the outlap. There was no red flag, fortunately, and there was definitely caution from the entire riding group throughout all of practice. My best lap was a 2:19. At the time, I was not super concerned, everyone was very slow, and I had no interest in dumping it during P1. Practice 2, everyone picked it up, and I did a best lap of 2:09. Keeping my goal in mind of a sub 2 minute lap, and remembering that my best lap was a 2:01, I was getting somewhat confused. I was not running 10/10ths, but I was definitely pushing, and I felt like my riding skill had substantially improved from the skill I had in round 2. Last time that I had actually put in a fast lap. Round 3, my engine exploded before I put in a full effort lap. It was time for the first race of the weekend, Open Twins and Hooligans. I started with a decent launch, keeping in mind that many of the bikes in this race are big twins like Ducatis and KTMs. This is always followed by a terrible entry into turn 1 with relatively zero speed. Why I'm letting off the gas earlier than I do for the full speed straight is something that I didn't realize until reviewing this video. I would end up finishing this race a lap down and wouldn't even make it one lap without getting passed by the second wave starters. I ended up P last, and except for the one rider who unfortunately went down coming out of the Ds. This was the first time that I have finished in front of anyone on track. Not exactly how I want to do it, but it is a milestone, I guess. My fast lap was a 2:04.853. The second race of the weekend is the only one that I want to do well in, Lightweight GP. It would have been nice to get my helmet cam footage. Unfortunately, I turned it on while putting it in my helmet, so when I turned it on in the pit lane, it turned it off. GoPro it is. P4 is on an R7, P3 a Ninja 400, P2 an RC390, and P1 a 125 two-stroke from the 90s. I wonder who's going to get the best jump off the line. Same as usual, that is definitely something I do not need to work on at the moment. This race is the first time that I actually finished in front of a running bike though. According to timing and scoring, I placed 7th out of 10 riders. I believe that I actually placed 8th and that there was a transponder glitch for the rider scored in 9th place. Watching through the footage, I lead into turn 1, 6 riders pass me between turns 1 and 5. A 7th passes me coming through the Ds. There were no penalties that I know of, so I'm going to consider this an 8th place race. Still, I did beat 2 riders that were still on their tires and had a fast lap of 2:05. Final race of the day was Sportsman. I ended up gridding incorrectly for this one. Looking at the video, you can see the guy who started inside one row behind overshoot his grid spot. This tricked me into believing there was a spot where there actually wasn't, and he was supposed to be where he ended up, inside of the second row wave 2. I was supposed to be in the middle of the second row wave 2. I don't think that this really mattered to our on-track order because he should have been flying past me. I have no idea what this guy was doing. Maybe he was just watching me because I'm bad at riding. Maybe I'm too unpredictable and he doesn't want to pass me. I'm not sure. Looking at Andrew's times throughout this weekend, in the Open Twins and Sportsman races for the other days, he did minute 50 laps. So I don't know why he did just 2-minute laps from there. I would love to know. If you somehow have found this video, please leave a comment. I'm baffled. I don't know what you're doing. With this in mind, I really should be 9th of 10 in lightweight GP, taking him out of those running orders, and P last in Sportsman with a best lap of 2:05. After these disappointing flap times, I decided that it was time to cheat. Not the actual rules, just my brain. I put on my set of Michelin Power Cup Evos, replacing my Pilot Power 2 CTs. This was after a group of riders who have a garage had offered a spot in their garage since one of their group had left early. This would give me power so that I could run tire warmers rather than just running straight up DOTs and calling it good. They were extremely gracious for hosting me and giving me tips. These tires have the Power Cup Evos have a taller crown, allowing for more lean angle before running over the edge of the tire. They also allegedly have a stickier compound and should be better than my now well-worn Pilot Power 2 CTs. Saturday night, thankfully the generators chilled out, so obviously the wind picked up and helped me sleep very little again. Super cool. It did not help me to get up in time and get things ready in my pit for P1, so I skipped P1, and I just went out for P2. With fresh rubber and a fresh mind, I was ready to put in some confidence-building laps. These laps felt worse than any laps that I had done before, and I came in early with a best time on 3 laps of 2 minutes 16. I believe this was to do primarily with my tire pressures. I had set them based on the recommendations of Michelin's website, and my bike and riding speed are not that which Michelin believes you should be running these tires with, meaning that I needed to drastically increase my tire pressures because I do not build enough heat in the tire because I am too slow. So I fixed that in between P2 and my first race, which was lightweight GP. With no confidence in anything, I kind of just did laps. I believe another timing and scoring error occurred and resulted in a missed lap for Kenny Hutton, so I'm going to treat this one as another P9 of 10. A best lap of 2:06 on better tires and with warmers really took the last bit of wind out of my sails for the rest of the day. Between races, I talked with the Toxic Moto guys and got a new set of Bridgestone Rain race tires installed on my extra set of rims. Rather than run in Open Twins and then 2 races later run in Sportsman, I decided the last race of my day would be the Sportsman race. For this one, I spent the preceding 15 or 20 minutes listening to Doom 2016 soundtrack's Vegacore and BFG division, telling myself that I just wouldn't lift. This definitely got me amped up and ready to go. Therefore, I blew the start for the first time and wheelied, then chopped the throttle. Luckily into turn 2, I gathered my mental back up and began pushing. This was my most consistent race, and I ended with a 2-minute 7 flat. After all of this, it was time to pack up, during which a small rainstorm rolled through. Fortunately, I got my bike in the back of the truck before the rain came. Anyone with the plastic bed Tacoma and a metal ramp knows that that is a slippery combination in the wet. While this was happening, I was packing up my pit and helping others. My tent was busy blowing away. Luckily, my clothes and a few other things in my duffel bag had stayed there just getting wet in the space that my tent used to be, but the tent went bye-bye. I have no idea where it is. Maybe it has tumbleweeded its way all the way across Utah into Nevada by now. It was some Walmart tier 3-person dome tent. I'm not super sad that it's gone, but it was definitely interesting to come back to pretty much nothing and scattered clothes where my stuff used to be. With this new development, I decided I'm just going to drive home. I was going to camp here, but I'm just going to drive home and be done with this disappointment of a weekend. I left at about 6:30 and took a couple naps at rest stops on my way home, getting there at 4 a.m.-ish. I think the biggest highlight of the weekend that I can't find on video, unfortunately, I did find the clip, and it is of me running wide over the alligators in the Black Rock hairpin. Normally this wouldn't be something to celebrate, but even though I blew the turn, I got refocused, and while going over the alligators, did what I have now learned is the correct thing, which is to stay relatively on the gas and continue your corner as normal. I think I did this moderately well, but not great. It was much better than my last encounter with the exit curving. What a frustrating and poor weekend to mirror that of my racing year. Bad riding is the headline of the year, and if at first you don't succeed, fail again. First, an ignition coil failure, then in round 1, a P1 crash, my tent blowing away, then getting snowed out day 2, spinning a bearing at round 3, buying a bad motor, low-siding trying out a new line, not improving my big track speed after feeling like and objectively making progress at the nature trail, plus a more powerful engine, rebound damping on my rear shock dying, then my tent blowing away again. What a year. At this point in the future, I will go over season point standings, but I just don't care because I earned P last in all but 2 of the races, so any season standings that I have are because other people didn't show up as much as I did, and, you know, that is worth something, but it's not worth a whole lot right now. I started the season with 4 goals. Run every lap, which I failed round 1 P1 and I finished on the lead lap 2 times all year. Feel comfortable with all of the non-riding procedures. Absolutely. I know what to do and how to do it for all of the things involved. Improve my lap times by an aggressive but achievable amount. Failed. Sub 2 was very possible, my mental just wasn't there. Have some paddock buddies. Success. Cole and Lugna have been great paddock friends. I look forward to being around them more in the future, hopefully in better spirits. I think a large source of my difficulty so far with racing has been my inexperience. I bought my first motorcycle and started riding halfway through 2021. My first time at any track was the Missoula Nature Trail, essentially a supermoto track, on a Yamaha Bolt in 2022 twice at the end of the year. Throughout 2023, I rode a 1983 GPZ 550 around that same track, consistently improving. Then, without ever riding on a full-size track, thought that I should go racing on a bike that I had never ridden until 2 weeks before the rookie license day, and never at above 45 miles an hour. I know lots of people will suggest that you should go to the track and go racing sooner rather than later. I think the pace and amount of change that I threw at this process was too high for someone of my age, experience, and skill level to go from a cafe cruiser to a UAJM to a race bike, having never ridden a modern sport bike before, was a ridiculously large jump. I believe that with my experience throughout this year, I will improve next year. However, a lack of any measurable improvement this past round makes me question that statement. Sometimes you're stuck just being Milkadono slow. Until they kick me off the track for being that slow, I will continue trying to get faster. Thank you for watching. Enjoy.